The other thing, though, I want to ask you about the actual work that you're doing. You don't approach it from a very lost perspective. You don't approach it from a very sad perspective. In fact, if I remember correctly, this is the way it feels, and correct me if I'm wrong. When you're talking about this, you're not telling people what to do or how to feel. You're telling them to accept how they feel. Is that
Oh, I definitely think you have to accept how you feel. I definitely think that when I looked back on it, I said, I have to grieve. We have to grieve in this culture. And I think a lot of times we don't allow ourselves to grieve.
hmm
We think maybe we're braver than we are. We think we've gotten over it, or we try and replace it. I mean, I had lots of different losses. My
right?
my retirement, the kids left eventually. There were just lots of things. My career was no more. But I don't think that we often let that happen,
Okay, okay.
allow that to happen. Yeah.
Yeah,
And we
does
try and replace it with something else.
and it doesn't sound like you're the type of person in your organization that wants to put out a bunch of solutions all at once either for somebody. Oh, I've been through that. Here's how you solve it. It doesn't sound like you do that either.
I don't think there is a one size fits all, but I really think that if we can get to the core of after we grieve and get ourselves back on our feet, if we can get to the core of why we're in pain, I think that, as you said, this vacuum or this space, things start opening up. We can start to see things that we couldn't see,
hmm
solutions, because our mind is freer. I think that once we let go of the things that we're holding on to so tightly that we think are making us happy and think are the sources of happiness, we have this this intellectual capacity. I think our hearts open up, we feel better. So I think that it that those solutions will come because everybody is unique, everybody's different. We're out and we all have different levels of creativity that we can tap
Great. Yeah.
into
Yep.
that are waiting there for us. So
Perfect.
I occasionally I will write articles saying this is how I did it and these are some things that you can think about. I'm not generally a how-to person in terms of very specific things, but I do think that there are some helpful things in
And
various
that's
circumstances.
and that's a very unique approach to this that I think a lot of people need to hear about and to understand. That's part of your unique, your powerfulness, the way you handle that. I want to change the subject just a little bit and go
Sure.
back to your TEDx talk a little bit. Can you tell us about your journey to get to that TEDx? From the time you decided that you wanted to do it to the time that you walked up on stage to do it. Can you tell us about that?
I had moved to Savannah after I sold my house. I actually came here. I wasn't sure I was going to stay. I just didn't want to shovel snow anymore and I wanted to get here and have some warmth for a while, and I just wound up staying. So, I wound up staying here, buying a condo, making friends, getting involved in boards. I started writing my memoir. And I will just have to say, just quickly, because I think this kind of goes into your question. For years, people would write to me and say, how can I save my marriage? And I would write back to them and saying, like, I wasn't able to save mine. And I'm not a therapist.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
People would continue to write to me and say, I'm in such pain. I don't know what to do. And for me, having gone through what I did to get to a place where I felt really happy and free and able to start over, I said, the one thing that I can do is I can tell you what I did. I can tell you what, uh, how I held on, how we all hold on, and how I was able to let go. Because we hear that in our culture. We hear let go. Nobody really knows what does
What
that
that
mean?
means.
How
Yeah.
do you do it?
Yeah.
So I thought the one thing that I can do is I can write about my experience. So I started writing my memoir.